Imagine opening Spotify and finding only one genre. Every song, every artist, every playlist. Just one. Sound ridiculous, right? Then why just do we expect people to become just the one thing? Talking head, somewhere along the way, curiosity stopped looking like intelligence. It started looking like confusion. And I think the internet has something to do with that. Every creator has heard the same advice. Pick one thing, build an audience, become known for one idea. It sounds like good career advice until you realize what it quietly asks you to give up. We call it focus, we call it branding, we call it knowing who you are. But look closer, and it's a system quietly rewarding people for becoming smaller versions of themselves. Not because smaller is better, because smaller is easier to file. Here's the idea I want to sit with today. The internet didn't make us more expressive, it made us more categorizable, and we have mistaken that for identity. Every app on your phone is playing the same game. It looks at millions of people and asks, where do we put this one? It doesn't understand nuance, it understands tags. And the price of being understood by an app is that you have to stop being a person and start being a category. That's not a conspiracy. Nobody designed it maliciously. It's just what happens when billions of people are filtered through the systems built to predict, not to perceive. So here's Act 1. The machinery of sameness. It doesn't ask that question through conversation, it's asked through the repetition it watches. What you click and it looks for the pattern. And the fastest way to answer it to repeat yourself. Post the same kind of video, talk about the same three topics, wear the same aesthetic. The system rewards consistency because consistency is legible. A person who does five unrelated things is noise. A person who does one thing over and over is a signal. So the incentive is obvious. Even if no one says it loud, specialize and you will be seen, wander, and you will be disappear. This isn't just true for creators. It's true for anyone with the LinkedIn profile, a dating app bio, a resume. We have all learned, whether we admit it or not, to compress ourselves into something scannable. Here's nobody mentions. Compression always loses information. When you zip a file, you save file, but you also strip out whatever the algorithm decided wasn't essential. Do that to a person long enough, and the parts that don't fit the label don't just get hidden, they start to atrophy. I studied engineering for a while, not because I hated it, I actually liked the parts of it, but because somewhere in the middle of it, I noticed I was more interested in why people build things than in the building itself. The psychology behind the startup pitch, the story structure inside a song, the way a founder talks about failure versus the way they talk about success. None of that fit in engineering student. So for a while, I tried to file it away as a distraction, a hobby, something to feel little guilty about, because it didn't match the label I already picked. For a while, I genuinely believed something was wrong with me. I would spend one day writing music, the next reading about startups, then I would disappear into psychology, games, or storytelling. Every productivity video told me I lacked focus. So I tried to fix myself. Looking back, I don't think I was broken. I think I was just curious. Apparently, liking music, startup, psychology, and games means, according to the internet, I have commitment issues, right? So this channel is an experiment, not to prove curiosity always wins, but to see what happens when I stop apologizing for it. I'm not telling you this because it's an interesting biography. I'm telling you this because I think almost everyone has a version of this. Some curiosity they quietly demoted to hobby because it didn't match the account they're building. The demotion is the real cost. Not that we fail to specialize, that we start treating the parts of us, that we start treating the parts of us that don't specialize as less real. There's a story we tell about focus that makes it sound noble. The founder who found their one thing at 22 and never looked back. The creator who knew their niche from day one. We hold this up as proof that certainty is a virtue. But look at almost anyone whose work actually lasts, and the story is rarely that clean. The founders who build things that change an industry are rarely lifelong specialists. They usually spend years, half inside several different worlds before the idea even made sense. They were outsiders who understood two fields well enough to see the gap between them. A gap that specialists on either side were never positions to see, because specialists on either side were only ever looking at one side. Insight wasn't hiding inside a niche, it was hiding in the space between two niches. A space that by definition doesn't belong to anyone who is fully specialized. Curiosity isn't the opposite of expertise. It's often the thing that tells you which expertise is worth building. Now, to be fair, to the other side, because this idea deserves pushback. Focus does work. There's a reason do one thing well shows up in almost every piece of career advice ever written. That compounds. A person who spends 10 years mastering one craft will, on raw skill, usually outpace someone who spent 10 years sampling 5, and there are real danger in romanticizing curiosity. Using I'm still exploring as a permanent excuse to never finish anything, never commit, never risk being bad at something long enough to become good at it. Curiosity without follow through isn't a competitive advantage. It's just a distraction wearing a nicer word. And honestly, some people really do hide behind curiosity. Let's they call it exploring because commitment is scary. So the honest version of this isn't never specialize. It's more precise than that. Specialize is specialize in the skill, stay curious about the subject. Get genuinely excellent at something, writing, building, performing, whatever it is. But don't let the topics you're allowed to be curious about shrink down to match your job title. Those are two different kinds of narrowing, and only one of them is dangerous. So, here's the part that makes more than a personal reference. We are living through the fastest period of change most of us will never witness. Entire categories of work are being reshaped in years, not decades. The person who only knows one thing deeply and nothing about how that thing connects to anything else is the most fragile version of a professional you can be right now. The people navigating this well aren't the ones with the narrowest focus. They are the ones who can move between domains without panicking, who understand enough about psychology to build better products, enough about storytelling to communicate their ideas, enough about business to know if their good idea can survive contact with reality. That's not a hustle culture argument for doing more. It's the opposite. It's an argument for staying wide enough on purpose that you can still recognize an opportunity when it shows up somewhere the algorithm never would have recommended to you. So maybe the answer isn't to reject labels completely. Labels are useful. They help people find your work. They help you explain yourself in a sentence at a party. But the label should be a door, not a room. Something people use to find you, not a container that decides what you are allowed to think about once they are inside. The internet will keep asking you to become one thing. That's not the that's not going to change. It's just how these systems are built. But you get to decide whether you treat the request as an instruction or as a suggestion made by machine that had never once been curious about anything in its life. Maybe internet never figures out what this channel is. That's fine. Machines once have to understand it. The right people will. Stay curious, stay eternal.